Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
According to Israeli official sources, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon called the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak to apologize for the death of 3 Egyptian soldiers in Rafah at the hands of the Israeli forces. Sharon also confirmed to President Mubarak that he is looking forward to the meeting with Foreign Minister Ahmed Abdelgheth and the Director of the Egyptian Intelligence Agency, Omar Suleiman. The meeting will take place this coming Wednesday in order to continue their dialogue and mutual cooperation. 3 Egyptian soldiers were killed by Israeli gunfire on the Egyptian territory on the Philadelphia crossing on the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. This incident occurred at a very sensitive time, especially for Israel, since it is asking Egypt to secure the Gaza Strip following their withdrawal next year.
The result of this incident is unfortunate, and we are deeply sorry for the accidental death of 3 Egyptian soldiers. We are investigating the incident.
This incident occurred 1 week before the scheduled visit of the Egyptian Foreign Minister Ahmed Abdelgheth and Omar Suleiman, the director of the Egyptian Intelligence Agency, on November 24th. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon personally apologized to the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. According to an Egyptian police report, the 3 Egyptian soldiers were killed by random Israeli gunfire. An Israeli tank shelled the Tel al-Sultan area in Rafah on the Egyptian-Israeli border. The Egyptian report is different from the Israeli one. According to Israel, their forces thought that 3 people were planting an explosive device on the border and immediately opened fire, killing Ali Subhi al-Najjar and Muhammad Abdel Fattah. The 3rd soldier, Amr Abu Bakr, died later at the Mubarak Hospital in Al-Arish due to sustained injuries. The Egyptian foreign minister stated that Egypt strongly denounces this incident and wants to open a full investigation. The Secretary General of the Arab League also condemned the incident.
What I will say is that we are very disturbed with what happened.
The Egyptian public is closely following the situation in Palestine and is very concerned with what occurred to the Egyptian soldiers. They expressed their frustration with Israel and criticized the indifference of the Arab world.
Of course, people on the Egyptian street today are very upset about the incident, about the 3 who died. It also happened last year that 3 were killed. The problem is not in the deaths of these people. The situation is going to remain the same because there is no Arab Union that can stop the actual situation.
Regardless of the details that led to this incident, the reality is that it is part of a series of similar incidents that took place in the area. However, this is the most dangerous attack on the international border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. Iraq witnessed separate security incidents, including bombing, car bombs, and violent clashes, killing and wounding many Iraqi civilians. The battle began in Fallujah, where the United States Army warned in a secret document that fighters will return to the city with strength if there is not a decisive American military victory there. Meanwhile, in Ramadi, there were violent clashes, resulting in the killing and wounding of many civilians. In Mosul, where security has deteriorated since the Fallujah events, has witnessed assassination attempts and attacks on American convoys. Also, the capital of Baghdad witnessed a car bomb attack, killing and wounding many. And in Kirkuk, the largest number of civilians were killed and wounded in an explosion that occurred in the center of the oil-rich city, near an American army position.
A battle that they hoped would be limited to Fallujah has spread to other parts of Iraq, from Fallujah to Baghdad, to Mosul to Ramadi, to the city of Biji and Kirkuk. This scene could have been the same anywhere. Killed and wounded, destruction and devastation, Iraqis are paying a generous price with their blood. Amidst the brutal killings and the neglected bodies scattered on the streets of Fallujah, U.S. forces are now talking about execution rooms, which they found and which the Marines claim were used by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi's group to behead foreign hostages. Execution rooms, many weapons storage rooms and hostages, most of whom were Arabs, and dozens of charred bodies, recognized by their smell. All this was discovered by the U.S. forces during its combing operation that they carried out in the city. This is accompanied by exploding and demolishing homes, in addition to shellings that were centered in the southern areas, in order to eliminate some pockets of resistance. This takes place as some fighters are entering the city through the Euphrates River, or old roads, despite a strong siege by the U.S. and Iraqi forces. The afflicted Fallujah residents tried to fix up the city as much as they could during moments of relative calm, and amid warnings that the humanitarian situation will deteriorate. The Iraqi president attempted to brush over the situation by offering emergency aid to the citizens.
Every family in Fallujah will receive an amount of 150,000 dinars, along with a complete food package. The Minister of Finance ordered a sufficient compensation for the families whose homes were damaged.
There were armed men in the streets of various cities, but they had more freedom in Ramadi, more than in Fallujah. In Ramadi, armed men clashed with American forces, killing more than 9 Iraqis and injuring 15 others. The attacks were not the first of its kind in Ramadi, which has seen repeated attacks by fighters, as well as an increased number of clashes. Meanwhile, in Mosul, the violent operations escalated since the attack on Fallujah. This attack was on the city's governor's office, killing one of his bodyguards and wounding 4 others. And a fire erupted from a gas transport vehicle that was stopped nearby. In addition, a U.S. military convoy came under attack by mortar shells. Baghdad also experienced part of this mobile war when a car bomb exploded outside a Yarmouk police station, killing 2 civilians and injuring 4 others.
A car bomb exploded at the Yarmouk police station, causing a lot of damage. We sent 4 injured people to the hospital, and 1 child was dead.
The scene in Baghdad was repeated in the northern city of Biji, where a car bomb explosion killed 4 Iraqi civilians. In Kirkuk, on the side of one of the streets, a bomb targeted an American military convoy, killing 2 civilians. The number of killed civilians was mixed with the number of killed armed fighters. The Iraqi government says that more than 1,000 fighters have been killed from Fallujah, ignoring the number of civilian victims who have fallen in this war, which was launched to control rebel cities before the general elections. However, calls for boycotting the elections are increasing day after day.
As U.S. occupation forces continue to hunt down fighters in Fallujah, a Red Cross official in Baghdad said that at least 800 Iraqi civilians were killed in the U.S. military offensive against the city. The official predicted more death among children in the city if urgent help was not sent there.
Despite the fact that the U.S. military is a party which actually knows what's going on in Fallujah, it has avoided so far to talk about the number of civilians killed in the besieged city. Occupation forces sources have boasted about killing a large number of fighters that reaches 1,200. But the Americans are voiceless when it comes to releasing figures on the death toll among civilians. But what's really shocking is the information released by a neutral party, that is the Red Cross. According to a Red Cross official, at least 800 civilians have been killed since U.S. forces launched its offensive 10 days ago. Speaking on condition of anonymity for fears of U.S. military reprisal, a high-ranking Red Cross official in Baghdad said his estimate is based on reports from Red Crescent aid workers, from residents and from refugees. The official added that both Red Cross and Iraqi Red Crescent relief teams had asked the U.S. military in Fallujah to take in medical supplies to people trapped in the city, but the Americans closed their ears. A convoy of relief supplies from both organizations continues to wait on the outskirts for military permission to enter, according to the official, who estimated that about 5,000 residents remained trapped within the city because they were too poor to leave or lacked friends and family outside the city and therefore had nowhere to go to, or they simply had not had enough time to escape before the siege began. The Red Cross official confirmed that they had received several reports from refugees that the military had dropped cluster bombs and used phosphorus weapons that caused severe burns. The situation within Fallujah is grim, according to the official, and if help does not reach people soon, the children who are trapped will most likely die. The Red Cross official indicated that the Iraqi Health Ministry had stopped supplying hospitals and the clinics in Fallujah 2 months before the current siege. The international organization official affirmed that the hospital there do not have aspirin and concluded by saying, quote, "In my opinion, this shows that they have had a plan to attack for a long time and were trying to weaken the people."
A report by the Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot revealed atrocities committed by the Israeli army against Palestinian resistance fighters. The report quoted soldiers as saying that officers knew that their soldiers mutilated and cut off body parts. They said these acts have been going on for quite a long time.
Though similar to the crimes committed by U.S. forces in Fallujah and Abu Ghraib prison in occupied Iraq, these footage are the trademark of the Israeli occupation army. Yediot Ahronot Israeli newspaper revealed in a report to be published Friday that Israeli soldiers mutilated bodies of Palestinian resistance fighters. According to the report, the mutilation was a sort of ritual act. Soldiers messed with the bodies, performed a dance over it, and took memorial photos. The photos were used to be distributed inside the unit and even put on sale at other units. The report confirms that officers were involved in these acts. One of the incidents that the officers knew about was when troops of Nahal unit hung the head of a Palestinian self-martyr on a cane and made a scarecrow of his remaining body parts. They later took pictures beside it. Other soldiers tore off some limbs and wore it on as a spell. These atrocious acts were revealed by soldiers who preferred to be kept anonymous. They said these acts are not rare inside the Israeli army units, but rather constitute part of the soldiers' habits. A spokesman for the Israeli occupation army quickly lashed out at the incidents, saying some of them happened years ago, making it hard to chase down those responsible.
Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh reaffirmed his pledge to build a new Kashmir while appealing to those seeking independence to renounce armed struggle and return to the political mainstream. Singh was on the second and final day of his first visit to volatile Kashmir since becoming Prime Minister in May.
On the final day of the Islamic holiday of Eid al-Fitr, hundreds of Kashmiris could gather briefly on either side of a river that separates their divided Himalayan region between Pakistani and Indian-controlled zones.
When I see this situation, I feel like I want to cross over the river to go and meet our relatives. But it's a shame. We can't do anything apart from wave our hands.
Families separated for decades by the Kashmir conflict shouted greetings over the noise of the water. Indian soldiers were preventing people from getting too close, and on the Pakistani side, police said authorities had not given formal permission for the reunions. Some Kashmiris on the Pakistan-controlled riverbank were skeptical whether India's withdrawal of troops on Wednesday from areas under their control was anything more than a public relations stunt.
We are hopeful that the Indian army will withdraw, but the Indian government has broken the last few promises it has made, so I don't trust them. They will withdraw 20,000 troops and then bring 20,000 others back.
The Indian army has not said how many troops will be removed from Kashmir, but military experts estimate India has some 250,000 troops in the region. In the winter capital Jammu city, police and paramilitary forces have been put on high alert ahead of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's second day of his first visit to the region since his Congress government took power in May. Singh reiterated that redrawing the border was unacceptable while calling for dialogue to resolve the conflict. Meanwhile, Pakistan's President Pervez Musharraf met pro-independence Kashmiri leaders to discuss his new proposals on solving the half-century dispute with India and told them to be flexible. He also called on New Delhi for flexibility in coming peace talks. The meeting was Musharraf's first with Kashmiri leaders since he flouted a raft of proposals late October, including demilitarization, the carve-up of Kashmir, and placement of sections under joint mandate or UN control.
Opposition activists from exiled former Army Commander General Michel Aoun's National Patriotic Movement are pressing ahead with plans to demonstrate on the eve of Independence Day, despite warnings by Interior Minister Souleymane Frangieh that the authorities would not tolerate an unlicensed rally. Frangieh said followers of anti-Syrian opposition figure Aoun did not request a permit in line with Lebanese law. In Washington, U.S. Congresswoman Eliana Ross-Lehtinen warned against clamping down on demonstrators, saying the U.S. and the world are observing. The U.S. representative said the ban only reflected the heavy-handed tactics of the Syrian regime and called for Lebanese and Syrian officials who, in her words, have been breaching Lebanese sovereignty to pay a heavy price. Meanwhile, the U.S. vowed to continue pressuring Syria to pull out of Lebanon. Sarah Khoury has a story.
Meeting is relatively
U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Feltman told a press conference in Beirut the U.S. wants to see the Syrian army out of Lebanon.
We certainly do support a positive and constructive Lebanese-Syrian relationship. It's only natural. Lebanon and Syria have a lot of shared concerns, and shared history, lots of shared ties. What we do want to see is a Lebanese-Syrian relationship that's based on the principles of mutual respect, that's based on the principle of non-interference in the domestic affairs of the states of the other, and the domestic affairs of the other state.
The United Nations passed Resolution 1559 in September, calling on foreign troops to pull out of Lebanon, a reference to Syria. Lebanon and Syria dismissed that demand as foreign interference in itself. Feltman said that the first step in implementing the resolution was for Lebanon to reinforce the south, where militants fired a rocket across the border into Israel on Monday.
We're very, very concerned with the developments in the south, and we have urged the government of Lebanon to reassert its control and maintain calm along the south. This is a very dangerous situation.
Feltman also described Hezbollah as a terrorist organization.
We do consider Hezbollah to be a terrorist organization. We consider Hezbollah to be a terrorist organization because it has military capabilities, that it regularly practices military capabilities that are not under the control of the government of Lebanon. And we regularly call and continue to call on the government of Lebanon to exercise its control, its sovereignty over all of the territory of Lebanon. It's not in Lebanon's interest to allow Hezbollah, a non-government entity, a terrorist organization in our view, to set the agenda of the relationship with Lebanon's neighbors.
Feltman also said Condoleezza Rice's appointment as U.S. Secretary of State would not change Washington's stance. He said she has personally been very involved in U.S. policy for Lebanon and personally worked with Washington Security Council partners in drafting and building a consensus to pass Resolution 1559. He made clear the U.S.'s policy towards Lebanon is not going to change.
His Majesty King Abdullah emphasized that Jordan is going on with its efforts to achieve needed reforms to energize national economy and enhance the democratic political process in the country. In a televised key address to the World Stop Broadcasting News Professionals Exchange 2004 held in Portugal, King Abdullah pointed out that lasting change in our region and the world does not come overnight.
Jordan has led the way with structural reforms. We are energizing our economy. We are working for a stable, democratic political life. And we put a significant emphasis on human rights. The new Human Rights Center has been established to act as ombudsman. In the area of the media, we're enacting laws to restructure state media organizations and disengage the government from direct control. Laws have been drafted to liberalize the sector, to open the public airwaves to private TV and radio stations. And we've abolished the Ministry of Information. Now we know there's work ahead. Lasting change is deep change, and deep change does not come overnight. But Jordan has made its choice for progressive reform, optimism, and peace, and many throughout the region agree.
He said that the media plays a pivotal role in achieving peace, security, and economic development all over the world. The king added that the big challenge is to see beyond the surface, to avoid distortion, and to translate not only between languages, but also between cultures and communities.
I believe in progressive change, and I believe for this to happen, we need thoughtful journalists and credible sources of news more than ever. Today, the camera lens is the eye, not the cameraman, but the millions of viewers watching over his or her shoulder. And we count on the global media to keep the focus clear. The challenge is to see beyond the surface, to avoid distortion, and to translate not only between languages, but between cultures and communities, especially today, Muslim and non-Muslim worlds.
On the issue of the region, His Majesty stressed the importance of achieving peace and stability in Iraq, and at the same time reiterating the Arab stance that is committed to establishing an independent, viable Palestinian state and to provide a real security for Israel to live in peace with its neighbors.
The deteriorating humanitarian situation in Fallujah generated strong reactions from the British society, especially from the Arab and Muslim communities and human rights organizations. The British press strongly condemned the destruction of the infrastructure at the hands of the occupation forces, which may put pressure on the British Prime Minister Tony Blair in the general elections.
These images are only one part of what is happening in Fallujah, which is being described as a war of extermination of an entire city, just because some suspected armed groups are hiding there. This negatively affected British citizens who are following the news.
People were wondering if what we saw on television was the only thing that took place. We want to know what really happened, what are the living conditions there, which are not shown to people. I think that what happened in Fallujah is brutal and ugly massacres. These massacres are motivated by strong hatred toward Islam and Muslims.
British Muslims strongly condemned the Fallujah events to a point that a huge crisis resulted between the British Islamic Council and the American ambassador. The council described what happened in Fallujah as barbaric acts and said that the citizens of Fallujah are paying a heavy price for the dreams and illusions of the neoconservatives.
We condemn the killing of the innocent kidnapped people in Iraq like Kenneth Bigley. At the same time, we are also condemning the killing of innocent people in Fallujah's hospitals, mosques, streets, and homes. The ones who are responsible for these killings are not only the persons that are committing the crimes, but also the ones who are giving the orders.
Some ordinary British citizens are increasingly saying that Iraq may become Blair's Vietnam, thus putting him in an awkward position as the general elections are approaching.
ربما يعاني على مستوى الحرج الشخصي، ربما يعاني على مستوى التكتيك اليومي.
He might pay the consequences at the personal level and maybe in the parliament. government while facing some lobby groups. I don't think that this will have immediate effects on Blair, but it will have a cumulative effect on the general elections.
لكن كله يصب في التراكم العام باتجاه انتخابات مقبلة.
منظمة العفو الدولية ومقرها لندن من الأصوات القليلة التي انبرت.
The London-based Amnesty International was one of the few organizations that condemned what is happening in Fallujah. Although its criticism was reserved, it only reminded the involved parties of the need to respect the rights of civilians and the injured in accordance with international law. There is no official British response yet, despite the anger of some British agencies in London and a segment of British society that does not agree with the war in Iraq. There is a possibility that all that is happening in Fallujah will be reduced to only one case, the case of the American soldier who finished off an injured Iraqi man. Azza Ziftawi, Al-Alam, London.
A few days after the release of a videotape showing an American killing an armed Iraqi man in a mosque in Fallujah, the phenomena of embedded journalists was discussed in the American Congress. The Congressional Committee of Armed Forces listened to testimonies given by senior military leaders in the American Army on the subject of allowing journalists to accompany armed forces during active military operations. The Democratic Senator Sylvester Reese argued for the cancellation of permissions given to journalists from some TV channels so they won't be allowed to accompany the armed forces during military operations. He claimed that this would give them an opportunity to support their claims against the United States.
وإلى فلسطين حيث أفرجت سلطات الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
The Israeli occupation authorities released Sheikh Hassan Youssef, a leader from the Islamic resistance Hamas, from prison after 2 years of detention. The occupation forces charged him with leading Hamas through the Palestinian Intifada.
على مدار الانتفاضة الفلسطينية.
العشرات من الصحفيين توافدوا مع ساعات الفجر الباكر إلى معتقل عفر.
Dozens of journalists went to the Israeli Afar detention center in Ramallah. They were waiting the release of Sheikh Hassan Youssef, a leader from the Islamic resistance Hamas in the West Bank. The Israeli occupation authorities released Sheikh Youssef after 2 years of imprisonment, which he spent in different detention centers. Upon his release, he told Al-Alam television that he has a message from the prisoners left in detention centers.
We can't reach a ceasefire agreement or any other settlement before resolving the problem of the political prisoners. The release from the prisons of the occupation forces must be secured.
Immediately after his release, Sheikh Youssef went to the grave of President Arafat and put a wreath on it. He gave his condolences to the Palestinian leaders who were waiting for him in the presidential headquarters. From the grave of Arafat, Sheikh Youssef confirmed the importance of national unity.
The death of Brother Abu Ammar is very sad and devastating. But the message of national unity, which we saw after the death of Brother Abu Ammar, is a good indication that this nation is able to overcome this crisis. God willing, we will be able to achieve the goals of our people, and good things will happen.
Sheikh Hassan Youssef represented Hamas for many years during meetings that were held with different Palestinian factions and attended by President Arafat. Many consider him as a leader with a wide vision who helped strengthen the resistance for many years.
He represents Hamas and the heroes, political prisoners. Because they are still in detention, we're representing them in our meetings. This is a good opportunity to strengthen our national unity and dialogue.
The release of Sheikh Youssef after 2 years of imprisonment gives an opportunity for Palestinian factions in the West Bank to create a common agenda. His release means that the Hamas movement will also be represented in meetings with Palestinian factions. Faris Sarafandi, Al-Alam Television, occupied Ramallah.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the